Hello. Today I'm going to be talking to you in this video about concept of a competitive environment. Again, in terms of developing a strategy, one of the things you need to understand is your competitive environment. So, kind of take it at levels. First, there's what I call the big picture environment, and so that's everything. And inside of that, there's a lot of going on. There's governments, there's people, there's all of that. And within it, there are multiple industries as well. And one of those industries is yours. Now, there are things that are sort of big picture things that might affect your industry and other industries at the same time and affect other elements of the environment, and you'll want to understand those. But specifically as it relates to your industry, we generally think in terms of that your industry is comprised of competitors, of which you are one of those, suppliers, customers, substitutes, new entrants, and sometimes, depending on whether you adhere to the Porter Five Force model or value chain or something else, you might add the concept of a complement. Think of a complement. We'll talk about what that is in just a little bit. So this is intended to just sort of give you the context of what we mean by the environment. So in the big picture, there are a number of factors that could basically influence the environment and influence your customers, influence your industry, and obviously could go beyond that. We generally break those into 6 categories. The first is a demographic category, and so that talks about age, affluence, which is usually income level, but really it's wealth, ethnicity, geographic location, education, the things that you would use if you just said, I want to describe somebody in terms of sort of their situation. And obviously in terms of the demographics, there can be trends. And so, for example, with age, there is a trend right now for basically what we would call the baby boomer demographic, which is the single largest population cohort in the U.S., is aging. They're now into the sort of 55 and up group, and they've moved through our economy slowly. And as they've moved through our economy, a lot of people, a lot of industries really have re-geared their products to that age group because it just is such a large segment. Another might be ethnicity. As a demographic, we are becoming less of a Caucasian country and more of a real melting pot country. And so for industries that in the past maybe had really targeted a Caucasian demographic, they're certainly now looking towards maybe a more diverse demographic. Sociocultural, that's your values, beliefs, lifestyle. Probably from a trend standpoint, there are a number of those. Certainly one of the more prevalent and reported and noted ones these days probably relates to sexuality and basically the increase in the number of openly gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, the LBGT community members, and the fact that basically as the numbers of openly I don't know exactly the way to say it, but people who declare themselves as being part of that sort of socio-cultural demographic or group, that some of the businesses have sort of shifted and industries have shifted to include those or consider those a bit more, maybe even target those. You got clearly the legal and political environment, so think about that as rules, laws, taxes, enforcement. It is our government, it is our police, all of those sorts of things. And so, from a trend standpoint, if you're seeing something going on in that environment, then that may influence things. There seems to be a political push, let's just say, um, for more health care, and so that creating a more healthy, conscious um, sort of environment, and having everybody have insurance and all that sort of stuff may impact your industry, as an example. Technological, um, that's know-how. What can you do? Um, Economic, obviously, sort of big trends like is our economy recovering or is it declining now? Is there inflation or is there not inflation? Uh, might include in that job employment. Is employment going up, going down? Is the job market getting better? Those sorts of things. And then a more global sort of view. Um, and here we're not talking global just being big picture, we're talking international. So most of these other demographics we really speak of inside the region, let's just say that our industry sits in. So that may be if you're really competing just at a state level, it may be the state, it may be a region of the country, it may be the whole country, and then global, sort of the bigger picture, what's going on outside of your region, in terms of, quite frankly, all of these other things. Um, for me, I'm using Disney as my example, and so I would need to sort of think of that um, company a little bit more and think in terms of the industries or businesses that they're in. And so for this, I'm going to use the Disney theme parks as an example. Disney has a lot of different businesses. They have their theme parks, they have their movie business, they own um, you know, TV networks. Obviously, they do a lot. They have toys, cruise lines. They have lots of different things, but I'm just going to focus on the Disney theme parks. It's going to make it a little bit easier for me. And so, from a demographic standpoint, Disney's recognizing that with an aging population, they're doing more in terms of making things accessible to folks in wheelchairs and that sort of thing. Their theme parks are more ethnically diverse, both in terms of the folks they employ and the kinds of stories and rides and so forth that they include within them. Sociocultural, absolutely, the theme parks seem to be picking up a little bit. I can't give a good example on the LGBT um, trend. Not clear that they've done anything that they haven't done in the past. They've never really been known as as an organization that has diversity issues. But perhaps behind the scenes they've had that, and so maybe they're working on that. I don't know. Political, legal, in terms of rules, laws, taxation, enforcement. Um, can't think off of the top of my head of something that might be a factor for them specifically, but certainly in that sort of, if you think of them as being in an industry that is, about entertainment, about going someplace to do something fun, that sort of entertainment, then from a political and legal standpoint, there certainly is a lot of legislation in a number of states, for example, related to safety, food quality, things like that. Um, Technological, this is probably the most obvious area where the industry trend is really expanding. The inclusion of more automation, more um, um, computer capabilities and animation and generation. Um, Video games obviously have been around for a while, but the quality of those and having those integrated into the experience, sort of these 3D and 4D rides, those are all examples of technological trends and innovations. Economic, You can imagine that the profitability from the parks is probably better when um, both the local and global economies are better. People have jobs. They don't worry about losing their job or not having money, that sort of thing. And so obviously that would affect them in the big picture. Whereas in tight times, companies may choose or customers may choose to not do the sort of once in a lifetime type events that usually the theme parks are associated with, the very occasional sort of events. They may opt for something closer to home, less expensive, until the economy improves. Let's talk then about within a particular industry, completely separate from the demographics, you have forces. And these are called forces because of a guy, Porter, that came up with the five force model for describing industries. You'll notice we have six of them because that's sort of been expanded. That view's been expanded. But the easy way to think of this is these are elements of your environment that are sort of industry specific. And so the first of those are obviously competitors. They are you as a competitor and the other companies in your industry that you compete against for within a particular business. And so obviously the force there is that customers have to choose between you and them. And sometimes they'll choose you and sometimes they'll choose them. And that's where the real competition, right, within the industry lies is if there aren't very many competitors, there aren't very many choices, there's a better chance of you getting picked, particularly if your products are superior to the others. Whereas if there are a lot of competitors, a lot of choices, and a lot of good, quality products in terms of that they meet the customer desires, then there's a lot lower chance that you're going to be picked, and so you may have a lower market share. The customers, obviously, from a force standpoint, the way to think about this is clearly one aspect is how many customers are there in your industry? Is that number growing or is it shrinking? But completely separate from that is the question of what's the situation of those customers. If the particular customer group that buys in your industry is less able to pay for things, then they're going to need lower prices. If they've got choices, and we'll talk about that in a minute, greater choice in the industry among the competitors, then they may demand higher quality for the same price. The other thing, just kind of throw this out here, sometimes your customers may become your competitors. And so imagine a situation where you've got, maybe not Disney is a good example because their customers are individuals, but imagine a situation where maybe you are somebody that supplies parts to somebody else, and at some point they just decide, well, it would be easier if we just made the parts ourselves. And in fact, we cut out buying from you, and we could start selling parts to other people that you're currently selling to as well. So that's a possibility. So, again, when we think competitors for the Disney theme parks, we might think of anything. It's anything that competes for your entertainment dollar, and so that might be anything from sort of at the simple end, going to the movies, going bowling, those sorts of things, to maybe going to the beach, going on a trip, going on a cruise, going to their theme park. Whereas from a customer standpoint, well, it's certainly a force. The folks who go to Disney as customers are probably, and we'll do this segmentation a little bit, they're probably fit into a different category of buyer, and they're making a different decision when they make the trip to Disney. For most of us, unless you're just living in Orlando, or near a Disney theme parks, or Orlando or Anaheim or something like that. Those folks are making a different decision than, let's go out and grab, movie tickets and go to the movies. Suppliers, who supplies to Disney? Obviously, there's a lot of technology in the theme park. There's a lot of food. There are engineers that that come in and do stuff. I think one of the things that Disney has done is to really take care of having the capabilities in house, owning them at the theme parks for pretty much everything that isn't what I'd call a commodity. And so they're in a little bit different position. It'd be difficult for a supplier to just say, I'm going to stop supplying what I do to Disney and I'm going to compete with Disney um, and sell directly to their customers. But that's not the case for everybody, right? I mean, if you are a movie theater and you rely on the studios to supply you films, and the studios suddenly say, you know what, I'm just going to put them all streaming online so people don't have to go to the movie theater, they could effectively cut you out of that industry. Um, Substitutes. Um, the thing you want to look for there, and there's, it's when we say substitutes, we're saying something other than the products in your industry. Um, but the idea is it's something that a buyer could, a customer could decide to purchase or do or use in this case that would completely replace the need for the whole industry if they sort of shifted to that. Um, in a broader sense, examples of that might be the horse and buggy industry when people started shifting to automobiles. So you want to understand that there could be something else that meets their need that's not your particular industry. Now, think of Disney as being in the sort of um, entertainment, right? Family style, go do something kind of business. And so the question really becomes for the family, what replaces that? And, or for the individual, what would be a substitute for that? If you thought about it for a little bit, you might come to realize that there are a few substitutes that you don't readily think of as in your industry. Um, One of those could be spending. The real addition, in addition to money, the real challenge with for the entertainment industry, if you will, this is that they're there. The need that they're really filling is you've got some spare time and you don't want to go to sleep. And so at the end of the day, if people have to start working longer, and so work becomes a substitute, have to go to school longer, school becomes a substitute, sort of takes away, it fills that time instead of that. Maybe you become more fitness conscious, and so you're spending more time at the gym or exercising or playing sports and not doing this. So that could become a substitute. All of those are things that you have to think of that would cause people to choose to do something different than spend their time and their money in your industry. Next category is a pretty easy one, potential entrants. So that's somebody that maybe isn't a competitor now. They're not really vying for the entertainment dollar now, but they could be. And so it's not a current competitor. It's not a customer that's already in the market moving back. It's not a supplier trying to cut you out. It's quite literally somebody that you haven't even thought about, didn't even know they existed, and all of a sudden they become a new option for folks. And of course, if you think of the entertainment sort of location, if you will, kind of industry that the theme parks are, the reality is that there's always potential competitors for that time and that dollar. Probably less so for in terms of popping up for the kind of commitment you make to take 3 or 4 days or a week and go to a big theme park like that. But you could probably think of things that pop up regularly where you say, well, if we've only got 1 week and we can only spend, do this once or twice in a lifetime maybe, or once every 5 years or whatever it is, and we're going to spend a fair amount of money, Is it going to, is there something new that's available that might be that? And of course, right now people probably think in terms of pretty staid categories. I'll give you one that sort of, as I thought about this, blows my mind. I'd not really ever thought about it before. The fact that there are commercial for-profit businesses now developing spaceflight means that for a certain number of people, when they need that week and they want to do something really that call it is on their bucket list, that a trip to space is now a potential entrant into this market. Right? It's expensive. It takes time. It's going to take weeks maybe to get you ready and all of that sort of stuff. It's certainly a once in a lifetime kind of thing for most people that they'll go talk to people about, and so it sort of checks all the boxes for maybe becoming an entrant that competes with Disney for people's dollars. And then there are complements, and this is that new thing added to the industry model, and it's kind of an interesting thing. A complement is a product or service that may impact the value of your product or service. So you don't sell it, and maybe it's not even in your industry per se, but things that happen to that product or service impact you. And so one of the examples that's commonly cited for this, think of that you're in the business of selling computers. That's great. You're Dell, you're whoever, you're Apple, whoever that is. There's a couple of complements to you that might dramatically change the value of your product or service. One is the components that make up the computer, in particular the speed of the processor and the speed and size of the memory. As those become better, the computer becomes an acceptable way to do a lot more things that maybe it couldn't have done before, in terms of that it's fast enough now and has enough storage. And so it creates demand for computers without you really doing anything other than saying, oh, now that they have one that's faster, let's put that in. So we didn't have to R&D the thing to make it faster, but somebody else did. But because they did, we now need to change our product. When we do, it changes the group of people that will buy it. Of course, the other side of that maybe is software. As the abilities of the computers improve, so does the ability of the software. And as the software is able to do more things, right? If it becomes able to talk to you conversationally so that you no longer need to, type on a keyboard regularly in order to put in information or get information out of it or get it to do something, that'll both change what you need to do in terms of your product, how you design it, but it'll also change the uses for your product, and there you go. So kind of a question is, what might be complements to Disney theme parks? One that strikes me as being a complement might be airlines. So when airline prices go up and therefore the cost to get from wherever you are to the Disney park goes up, that affects the number of people that will go to Disney. As those prices get cheap, that also affects the number of people that will be able to go to a Disney park, and so clearly impacts your product or service. So airlines are a complement. Depending on whether you stay on property or off property, if you stay off property, the cost of hotels, cars, food, all of those things impact the value. So those are potentially complements. So anyway, that's a lot, but that's sort of an example with Disney going through these forces. Next, what I want to do is walk you sort of through how to do an industry analysis. And again, I'm going to do it with the concept of Disney. What I want you to do is basically think in terms of, 3 or 4 kinds of criteria that characterize the industry. So remember, for Disney, we're focused on the sort of event type entertainment. So you go do something type entertainment, as opposed to, I guess, other things, but But anyway, in that space, I thought of three kind of criteria. Obviously, one is price, another is quality. So, do you want like a top of the line experience, unforgettable, or you just want a distraction? And then the third, another dimension is time. Sometimes you're looking for entertainment for an hour or two. Sometimes you're looking for entertainment for a weekend. And sometimes you're looking for entertainment for a week or more. And so the longer the time, that I think also plays into that there have to be more things for you to do to keep you engaged over that period of time. But I found that time's sort of an easy way of thinking about this. So let's think in terms of customers using those criteria. Just kind of start from left to right. It's a little hard to see what's going on here because it's three-dimensional. So I'll kind of talk you through it. But, I thought in terms of sort of a customer segment that's just the regular entertainment segment. And by that, what I mean is somebody that, or a family or whatever that's just saying, look, every week I'd like to spend a certain amount of time on entertainment, a few hours a week, whatever that works out to. So it's low time. I don't want to spend my entire life savings on that. As a matter of fact, I don't want to spend much at all. So it's low price. And quite frankly, I don't need it to just wow me. I just need it to be a distraction. So in the entertainment space, it's probably just a low quality experience. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's low quality compared to, relatively speaking, to other kinds of entertainment. Another sort of example of these segment, if you will, are people looking for, and I just call it traveling entertainment. And so the real feature here is it's still typically a short time commitment, but it tends to be something that you can't get every day. You need to schedule it in, so you can't just pop up at the end of, on a Friday and say, hey, I wonder what's going on, let's go do this. You need to plan ahead for it, that sort of stuff. Generally, therefore, is of a higher quality and a higher price. And so I think in terms of things like concerts and that sort of thing. But you do think of it as I want to do something that is nearby, convenient, low time commitment, but I'd like it to be of higher quality than just the stuff that I can do any old time. Another might be the seasonal annual event. And so, things that you kind of, you can do every year if you wanted to. They're not the kinds of things that you would talk about as, I need to do that before I die. It's more the kinds of entertainment that you think of as when you plan spring break, family vacation, Christmas, whatever it is. Oh yeah, we always go do that, or we do something like that, or we do something during that period. And so, there you're looking at something that's a little bit longer time commitment. It goes from hours to days, and, might be a weekend, might be 3 or 4 days, who knows. Could even be could be a week or more in terms of time commitment. In terms of quality, let's call it medium to high. It's certainly of the same quality as the traveling type things that you do. You expect to be treated a little bit better. You expect to have more choices, all that sort of stuff. And it's going to be more expensive. And, I put it as medium price. Think of it as medium price per day, maybe. Whereas this is I'm paying a cost of a concert ticket, maybe $100 for a few hours. Here you're going to pay $300 or $400 a day, possibly, for a few days, for these kinds of things. Then there's another category, which I would call the special event. And so that's we're not going to do this every day. We're certainly not going to do it every year. We just do it every once in a while. And, that really checks all the boxes. It tends to be high quality. It's the kind of thing that you talk about and remember for years. Tends to be high time commitment. You're going to go for a lot of times a week. You're kind of planning yourself around a week. You might have to plan to travel there. Might be further away, and it's high priced. It's the sort of thing that you not just everybody can afford to do all the time. And so, if there are probably other segments and you could think of it, but that would be an example of how you might segment your customers into it's really almost like a thing that they buy. But here you're not saying there's a group of customers that buys each of these. You're just saying that when customers are looking for entertainment at different points in time, they're looking for different things. And so that's really how we segmented our market. And then you do sort of a competitor assessment. So you can start, the easiest is to say, think of competitors that you would put into each of these groups. And so in the regular group, I would say arcades. So you go to a video arcade or whatever. You go to a game restaurant. I don't know of any around here, but I think in terms of some of those restaurants that serve food but also have a bunch of games for you to do. So it's sort of the whole night. It handles we need to eat, and then we're going to have some fun afterwards. Going to the movies, going bowling. You can add to this list a number of different things. Key thing there, though, is it's really got to be the kind of thing you can do in a few hours, not the kind of thing that you're going to do for days at a time. Traveling, I think of carnivals, circuses, and concerts. Obviously, those are things that you have to plan ahead for. They're announced. They're going to cost you a little bit more. You might even spend a little bit more time at them. You expect them to be a better experience than going to an arcade or a movie theater, that sort of thing. Seasonal might be Six Flags, ski resort, big water park, going to the beach, those sorts of things. You do them. You might do them once a year. Their prices, they're not cheap, but they're not the cost of the oh my gosh vacation. And then in the special events, obviously we put the Disney theme parks up here. It's the kind of thing you don't do every year, most people. Atlantis, don't know if you know what that is. If you don't, you should go Google it. It's kind of a cool little thing in the Bahamas, I believe. Maybe going on a big cruise, going to someplace like Fiji or Hawaii. So real destination type travel, abroad type things. And so, in a nutshell, that's kind of how you would look at your competitive environment. And obviously that should help you get a better understanding of where you fit into the big picture. Hope that's useful. Thank you.